Okay, welcome back to Cool Clubs Podcast. Today we've got Chris Voshall. He is the Director of Product for Mizuno Golf USA. Welcome, Chris.
I appreciate it, guys. Thank you so much for having me on today.
Pleasure. As always, we've got Mark Timms here. He's our CEO. And we want to take a look at a lot of the Mizuno product today. It's not just one thing. We've had a small discussion before jumping on today. You've got lots of things to go through. So I really want to let you lead us through what's coming.
Yeah. Yeah. To me, I'm so excited about where Mizuno is as a brand right now because, so many people think of us and you just think of irons. Like that's what we've been. That's kind of what has put Mizuno on the map. But when you kind of explore our family of golf clubs right now, we've got some really strong offerings, like really throughout the bag. So just in the last couple of weeks or months, we've seen some launches of some new drivers, some new putters, some new wedges, and just now it's kind of starting to leak some new irons that you're going to see coming up in the spring. So to me, it's like it couldn't be a more exciting time to talk about Mizuno and all of our different products.
Awesome. I can vouch for what you're saying. I'm sure Mark's seen it over the many years, right? Mizuno is nothing feels like a Mizuno. As soon as you say Mizuno, I picture the blue badge stamped in the back of an iron. Like that's where I get the feeling. But I'm interested to hear what's going on with the other stuff.
Yeah, and you're exactly right. It all starts with Mizuno, with technology and with feel. We put that tagline of nothing feels like a Mizuno front and center on purpose. And again, that speaks to every product we make. It starts with our grain flow forging. That's kind of at the heart and soul of what we've always done. That's a process that we've used in our muscle back blades all the way to our players' cavities and worked its way all the way up through the line and the JPX line for the last number of years. With some new Mizuno Pro that you have coming out, then all of a sudden you have it in a muscle back, a hollow body, as well as a player's cavity as well. So that grain flow forging, it just delivers that soft, solid feel that, you kind of expect when you play a forging, something that Mizuno's always been known for. But the cool thing about it is it doesn't just stop there. We're using that same forging technique on our wedges as well. The T-24 that are just launching have a beautiful look to them. Obviously, they look like a Mizuno, but again, they're grain flow forged. You get that feedback that you expect from a Mizuno on those as well, all the way down to the M-Craft line of putters and the Amoe putters. They all are forged as well. So there really aren't that many forged products on the market when you get outside of the world of irons. And with Mizuno, because feel is at the forefront of what we do, it's really a critical thing. So we put that in all of those products. And then when you get up to the wood side of the world, we've got a phenomenal family of ST woods. Really, it's up to 3 models now with the STZ, the STX, and the STG, which we just launched. Those have phenomenal feel with them as well as a ton of cool fitting capabilities.
Let's just touch on that grain flow forge a little bit. You've seen it. I've seen. Obviously, it's been splashed across as a marketing tool. But what actually is it as a process that makes it different from other forgings?
And that's probably my favorite question I ever get asked is to explain what grain flow forging is. So I love to tell the story of, there's casting and there's forging. Casting is where it starts as a liquid and then it solidifies into a solid. Forging is where you start with a solid and then you basically pound that solid into shape. Grain flow forging, the difference there are the steps we take within the forging process to ensure continuity of the grains within that forging. What I mean by that is you start with a billet of steel, and the actual grain flow forging process is a stretching and bending of that steel prior to the actual forging of the club. So what that gives you is, again, let's take it all the way back to the casting. With a casting, you tend to have a shorter sound, a shorter vibration, because there are really no grains because it's a liquid that's solidified. When you have a forging, you have grains within the club that make that club vibrate a little bit longer. However, when you have a grain flow forging where we have done that stretching and bending step, all of a sudden we know those grains are as long as they could possibly be. And the length of that grain equals a longer vibration. And it's so funny how vibration gets such a negative feeling in golf. It's like, oh, I don't want to feel vibrations. No, you want to feel vibrations. It's just up to us to make sure you feel the proper vibrations. So what grain flow forging is that stretching and bending, basically preparing that forging to deliver the ultimate in feel and consistency.
Awesome. I've never heard that out loud before.
I've said that once or twice before.
The forging's all done the same, right? Basically, it's a big piece of metal you put in here and a big thing pounds it down. So what
Hmm.
you're saying is your grain flow stuff is basically taking your bullet, whatever, I got a remote
Yep,
control here, and you stretch it and bend it to the initial shape first instead of
correct.
starting just pounding away to start with.
Yeah, in a typical forging process, as you said, it usually starts with a billet, roughly the shape of this
Yeah.
highlighter, and it'll go in, and when it sits in that mold, and then that hammer press hits it, grains and material flow in all sorts of different directions. So even though there's the consistency of the strike, there's the inconsistency of the flow of the metal. What the grain flow process does is it really directs that flow. So with that stretching and bending, by the time you do the strike that puts it into the shape of a golf club, the billet looks more like this. Looks roughly the
Yeah.
shape of a golf club. And with that in mind, now you have continuity of the grains from the hosel all the way down to the toe. So again, the longer that grain, the longer it's going to vibrate, the more feedback you're going to get. And when people say, it feels like the ball sticks on the face longer on forging, it feels like it was, buttery, soft, that's because you're feeling more vibration. It's because that ball literally does vibrate the club for longer.
Yeah, awesome. So that's now running through the whole family. I mean, we've had the JPX 923 model here, for quite some time. We run all of the models; they've been great. And obviously, I know you touched on it just a second ago. There are pro models coming. We've got 221,
Mhm.
223, 225 in. How about you lead us into what the new versions of those are going to be called and look
Sure.
like?
As good as we are at engineering the next product, we might be equally as bad about being as predictable what the next one will be. So the 2.2 family is being replaced with the 2.4 family. So the 2.21, 2.4, sorry, 2.21, 2.23, 2.25 are being replaced with the 2.41, 2.43, 2.45. Three levels of playability, all featuring that grain flow forging, all featuring a lot of things that players kind of expect out of Mizuno and expect out of that Mizuno Pro name in particular. Really, really clean aesthetic. All of the models got really cleaned up. They all got thinned out. Top lines got thinner, soles got thinner, yet we built more playability into each one of them. So starting from the bottom of it, the 241, that's the muscle back design. With that muscle back design, again, we did all things that a player's looking for in a muscle back. We went thinner top line, we went thinner sole, we went shorter from heel to toe, and all of that while we kind of manipulated the weighting of the head as well to make sure that you have a really, really consistent sweet spot throughout the set. So really a nice set of irons that allows the player to have a lot of control over what that ball is going to do. If you want to give a little bit more control to the golf club, that's where the 243 kind of kicks in. The 243 is also a grain flow forge golf club, but it features a combination of chromoly forging in the longer irons and our 1025 material in the scoring irons. That
What
chromoly,
is that doing? Is that 7 iron or
it does. The
six?
7 iron is chromoly, the 8 iron is not chromoly. And
Got
that's
it.
kind of where we do some really strategic steps as you're changing from one material to the next to make sure you don't have performance jumps or feel jumps, which are both,
Right.
very, very obvious if you do them incorrectly. So
What
what we do by forging it with that chromoly, you then go in and actually mill a pocket cavity within that that's going to allow that face to flex. And as you work your way to the 7 iron, we actually thicken that face ever so slightly to help dial back the COR so you have no jump to the 8 iron.
Gotcha.
So the chromoly is a different material or a different process, or both?
It's a different material, still
Same
follow
process,
the same
right?
process, correct.
Got
So
it.
it's a family of metals, and with the chromoly material, the benefit of it is it's still forgeable, and because it's still forgeable, we can still deliver that grain flow forge feel, but it's a lot stronger. And with that strength comes none of the limitations that you typically have from a standard, call it 1025 mild carbon steel.
Yeah. We've got some images. Hopefully, I'm going to be overlaying them here as we've been talking. Do you know when you see the first call of a club coming out and it's on WRX or somewhere like that,
Right.
and it looks like it's black and white? I can't tell if these images are like that because they're so neutral, or is this really what they're going to look like?
Yeah, and it's one of the things. It's as funny as it may sound. We have at Mizuno a design philosophy book that literally governs what we will and won't do on a Mizuno Pro type golf club. And a lot of that goes into the colors we'll use, the fonts we'll use, the shapings, the number of lines on the back of the club that we'll use. Like, we literally hold ourselves to a really, really high standard to make sure that it looks the part, on top of obviously feeling the part and performing the part.
Well, it looks the part. There is nothing going on. It looks like a pro golf.
Yeah, it looks like a professional.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah, super simple. Well, then let's move into that 245, which is going to have more tech, right?
Yeah, the 245 is really, to me, that's the one that's kind of the most exciting. And we saw it with the 225 as a golf club that literally, like, as it got longer in age, we sold more of them, because it's almost like people were awoken to that golf club and realized all the benefits that it brings to the table. So with that one, I talked about the chromoly material we used on the 243. That was a chromoly the entire golf club. On this one, it's a chromoly face and neck with that hollow body construction with a stainless back piece. And with that stainless back piece embedded within it is a just massive chunk of tungsten, low and deep within that golf club. So with that hollow body design, you have the look of the blade, the look of the, that a player really aspires towards for a Mizuno golf club, but you have a performance in terms of ball speed, launch, and actually delivering spin is one of the keys that we tried to do. So many golf clubs don't spin it enough these days, really making sure you can get ample spin to keep the ball in the air. So really excited about that golf club.
A question for you. So, the first one, this is replacing, obviously, the first, I think this is the first, hollow club you've done, right? So this is number 2, right? So obviously you learned a lot in the first group, and I think that's why it got popular late in the life, is people didn't realize Mizuno had that. He was talking about PXG originally did it, and TaylorMade, obviously, with their foam-filled stuff and whatever. All the clubs have been kind of getting popular to some extent, because you can make it look clean, right? So without and still have some huge performance stuff. So obviously, this is the second version you guys have done, so I'm sure you've seen some pretty big improvements on this one, right?
For sure. And it's funny, it's actually, when you look back at the history of Mizuno irons, we've been doing a hollow body construction for a while, and it's almost like we were a little ahead of our time, to the point where it was like we kind of stepped away from it. So even going back within like our MX line, the MX 900 was a golf club that actually had a very similar construction. It wasn't utilizing the chromoly material because we hadn't kind of discovered that yet, but it was a very similar construction with the tungsten down low, grain flow forged face and neck, and a welded back piece. However, at the time, it's funny because the golf clubs at the time, it was like, $799, $899 was the price of a golf club, and these were $1,400. So it's like, it was a little bit in no man's land. So I'll say that our engineers were kind of ahead of the game, and it almost took the market catching up for us to then be like, wait a minute, we got something in that category too. So yeah, you're right. In that time, ever since that, we've learned a lot, and a lot of it comes down to the construction itself and how you bond those clubs together, how that back piece interacts with that top piece, and literally like thinning out the sole area to allow a greater flex from the face so it acts like a larger trampoline, and then even thinning out the sole area and really looking at the type of welding that you're doing across the top line to not require a super thick look at the top. So again, we've learned a lot from the manufacturing side, the material side, and also the forging side to deliver a golf club that honestly we couldn't have done a number of years ago.
I remember the MX line. That must have been somewhere around 2009 to 2011.
Yeah, that's about right. And it's funny, if you go back and even look on tour, it's funny because on tour, I remember the year Brian Gay was on staff with Mizuno, and he won twice. He won at the Heritage and he won in Memphis. And he was one of the first guys who's like, man, look at what this type of club does. And he put that in the 3-iron, 4-iron, 5-iron, and started playing that combo set. And honestly, if you look at the modern bag now, that's what players are doing. Like,
absolutely, yeah. It was a staggering statistic. One of the companies told us that like 80% of the tour players have some sort of mixed bag, and it's not really that surprising, especially when you talk about driving irons and stuff getting blended in and stuff like that. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, and all the companies, I mean, you guys included, they're all starting to look at mixing and matching sets and stuff, and different long irons and different stuff. So that makes sense.
And that's what I love about the fitting world, is it's really unlocked just the knowledge for a player to understand that I need something different out of my longest iron than I do out of my middle iron and I do out of my shortest iron. So
Right.
that's where, it looks like a company will say, hey, Mizuno, you got 9 sets of irons. What's up with that? It's because you literally could play a different set from top to bottom to get dialed in from there. So just to give those fitters the option to play with different levels, different amounts of speed versus spin versus launch versus feel versus workability, all those different levers mixed within those families of irons, somewhere in there you can get dialed into a set that's really going to get you playing your best golf.
Touching on Mark's point, and I guess what you were touching on there too, is you've also got this driving iron style, the longer iron specific club. Tell me how that's separate, maybe in construction and design, from this 245 series, because you think hollow body, you think maybe top end of the bag, but there obviously is a difference there.
Yeah, you're right. There's a new Fli-Hi coming, and the Fli-Hi, it's a little bit of a different animal, and I'll say that because it is a long iron only, it takes a few of those handcuffs off that you kind of have when you're working on an iron set. Those handcuffs I'm talking about are the size, the feel, the sound a little bit. It's like when you're flowing something into a grain flow forged scoring iron, you've got to be really cognizant of what it sounds like in the long iron. So like a 245 long iron sounds like a muscleback. It sounds really solid. A Fli-Hi long iron, it sounds hotter. And what we do with that one is it's actually not a forged golf club. So it's using it's using a chromoly face, but it's a different execution on the chromoly and not a forgeable chromoly. So it's an even stronger version of it that allows us to go even thinner. And honestly, I don't want to say not care about the sound, but look for something different out of the sound, looking for an explosive sound, something that you realize is really firing off. And it kind of takes the handcuffs off in terms of the head size as well. The sole is a bit wider, the top line is a bit thicker, and that is honestly, it's why it's a black golf club and the others are chrome. That black is a kind of a slimming look, and it shows this isn't part of this. Yes, the cosmetics from behind are tied together, but this is designed to do something totally different.
Right. So do you carry that into the Pro family, or is that a
standard?
We
do. Yeah, so it lives within the Mizuno Pro family, the same cadence and everything. And if you look at like the specs of the Fli-Hi and the specs of the 245, they're eerily similar, even though the golf clubs do something pretty different. So it's interesting to see, kind of like working with tour players in particular, who's going to choose to put 245s in the long irons, who's going to put Fli-His in the long irons. Right. And a lot of it depends on, is it your longest one? Are you trying to bridge a gap to a hybrid, or trying to bridge a gap to a 5-wood or 7-wood that you see a lot of players using now? And the other thing about it is that Fli-Hi, it's a 370 tip. So it receives a hybrid type shaft as opposed to an iron type shaft. So again, there's a lot of like subtle differences that a fitter can help you figure out.
That's, to me, you touched on there. When I'm thinking about the separation of the two, if somebody's put a 245 in, maybe with a 243, they're doing that because they may be trying to increase a little bit of club head shape and get some more ball flight, maybe some more spin in that long end. When I'm moving into the Pro or the Fli-Hi version, it turns into a driving iron. It's solely from a tee. It's less of that stopping power and more of that run out kind of feel.
Yeah, it's funny. It's not uncommon to see players put in 2 or 3 245s on the top end. I'd say it's a little more uncommon to see players put in 2 or 3 of the Fli-Hi, because really that one is like a bridge between an iron and something else.
Right.
So you see a lot of
just one of them, right? So they might even have a 245 as a 4-iron or something, and then go to the Fli-Hi 3 and then a 5.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
Yeah, different. Right. So you're not seeing a lot of guys have multiple Fli-His in the bag on tour. Yeah,
exactly. So, but it's really fun just to see how the bags are evolving and see how the players have become so open to golf clubs like that. As courses have gotten longer, as players are just mashing the ball, like that type of club is really good for a lot of different things. I mean, you've seen that type of golf club almost step on the toes of like the modern hybrid, where the modern hybrid, you're not seeing
that.
With those type of driving irons, and then the low spinness of some of the fairway woods now, it's like you can do everything that used to require a couple of hybrids with clubs that do other things as well.
Right.
Yeah, it's a cool mix. Well, we know that the Pro line's going to have, as always, any Mizuno iron's going to have this cult following. We'll have it on the robot at some point.
Right. Definitely stick on a robot. That'd be a fun one to do, actually. We haven't done that. Do the driving iron type stuff.
Oh, driving iron
That'd
too.
be really
Yeah,
cool
yeah.
to see.
For sure.
There's a big range of performance on different ones out there, I would think.
Absolutely, you're right, and that's where you're really going to notice some differences in spins between them too. It's like for some of them that have super low spin, it's like you got to have crazy ball speed to handle 19 degrees iron type center of gravity depth, where you're getting 2100 RPM out of an iron. Like unless you're really moving it, then you need something a little bit more than that.
Or hit it really high.
Or hit it really high is right. That's the other.
I got low club head speed now, but I hit it really high, so I get away with some of those.
There you go.
So let's touch on something that maybe isn't so much, in the face of the clientele out there. And I've seen, and correct me if I'm wrong, we've seen the STZ and the STG drivers.
STZ. So STZ and STX. It's funny. I'll tell a little story of how Mizuno got to where we are and kind of where we're going. So, like on the wood world, there were years and years and years where we had a MP driver and a JPX driver. It was like a better player's driver and a worse player's driver, for lack of better words. And the designs kind of went along that route. So it put Mizuno in kind of an interesting position because we found ourselves purposely pulling forgiveness out of Mizuno Pro drivers and adding forgiveness and ultimately adding spin to JPX drivers. So it left us in a world where, if you look at what like modern tour players are playing, tour players are totally good with forgiveness as long as the spin is right. And it's like, it put us in a position where I'll say we struggled on tour for a little while. So a couple of years ago, we made a real commitment to saying, Mizuno's not just irons. We do great on irons, but we've got a lot of technology in our woods as well. So let's design a family of woods that allows the tour players to be fit into our woods, and also, give the proper lofts, give the proper options to allow the fitters to get you dialed in as well. So that started with the STZ and the STX. Then we had the 220. Now we have the 230 that came out early in 2023 and will actually continue on through 2024. What the Z and the X actually stand for is where we concentrated the mass along the Z axis and the X axis. The Z axis being in the front and back direction, so pulling a little bit more mass back for stability, really designed to go a little bit more straight, not as workable. And then the STX axis is pulling mass towards the X axis, towards that shaft axis, to give you the ability to kind of work the ball a little bit more, close the face a little bit easier. So we've added to that just recently the STG. G is not really an axis, but G is the adjustable center of gravity on that. So with the STG, we now have 2 7-gram weights on 2 tracks that aren't independently locked in either. So you have the ability to move things around a lot, give a ton of different fitting capabilities, and it is a smaller head. It's a 440 design head with a deeper face. It is designed to be that low spin monster within our line. So it gives the fitter a lot of options now to be able to mix and match different Mizuno drivers to get you dialed into the proper trajectory, spin rate, launch angle that you might need.
So it's just being added to the family.
Correct. That's right. So STZ, STX continue on through 23. The STG is a really good addition to it. And it's cool. You think about what Mizuno has done in the driver world. I mean, Keith Mitchell's kind of our main guy right now. And if you look at total driving stats for last year, he led the tour last year in total driving. And that's a Mizuno driver. A lot of players would not think that. Great combination of distance and accuracy. But he's a player who likes to see the ball fall left to right. For a right-handed player, the ball falling left to right is about the scariest thing for a lot of players. And that's where you need the option to have something like the STX that gives the ability to turn it over a little bit more. And then even with him, he's got so much speed that he brings to the table. He's okay to be slightly not optimal. Like his ball speed would dictate, wanting to be around 2,200 RPM, but he prefers to live in that 2,400 range just to give a little bit more control out of it. That being said, we didn't have the club that could deliver that, and that's where the STG steps in, is with that club and with that adjustability. Now, if a player's looking for that ultra low spin, we can get them there.
Can you actually take those? You got sliders on both sides, right? Can you put ball on one side if you wanted to? I mean,
We can, absolutely.
yeah,
And to me, that's one of the things I love about our design is with
right,
that fat track design and with two there, typically if you have a weight here and a weight here, I'll just use, for example, you have a 15-gram weight and a 2-gram weight, you're moving 13 grams by using 17 grams. So it's an
right,
inefficient movement of weight. With
exactly,
ours, you're replacing weight with air. So it's two 7-gram weights that you can concentrate completely on one side, completely on the other side, completely back, or completely forward. So to me, that's like the ultimate in
right.
movability. It's using the least amount of weight to move the most amount of weight.
Yeah, that's misleading in a lot of companies and stuff when you talk about those big weights and stuff. Yeah, if your lightest one's 2 on one side and your other side's 10, you're only moving 8, right?
Correct.
People,
And
we
you're
can
and
see that.
you're using 12 to move 8. And to me,
Exactly,
that's
yeah, exactly.
Well, this is a good looking driver, and it almost looks bonded. I mean, I can see there's a sleeve in there, but it's a really clean,
Yeah,
hidden sleeve.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at it, I'll say that the G, it's borderline a Mizuno Pro driver, if you want to call it that. Everything is very cleaned up. The head shape itself is very players. It's a squatty look. It's smaller. It's a deeper face. Even the Cortec chamber, our key technology on the sole, where on the ST230Z and X, it's blue. We actually blacked it out on the STG.
right.
Again, just giving it a little bit more of that player's look to it. Just because, if you're talking a golf club that spins as little as this one, honestly, it kind of speaks to that better player a little bit. So that's why we
Well,
do
I mean,
that.
if it's that low a spin, like same thing with like Callaway had a great driver last year at Triple Diamond, but a lot of people that low a spin can't keep in the air. So if you're not over
Right.
105 ish, it's probably not the
Totally.
right look at.
Totally. And I feel like I'm a good player. I can't play that golf club. I need more spin than that. So to me, it's a great thing to have in your arsenal, but it's never going to be the one that's the needle mover. It's never going to be the one that's going to take over the world. So it's the one that the fitter needs for that occasion that they need it.
Yeah.
And this is a whole family of STG with a fairway wood too.
Yeah, you're exactly right. So that's we've had STGs in the past, but it's funny how the STG in the past has always been one head, 9 degrees, right hand only, no fairways. So it's always been like, okay, you got to be a very specific, like really specific person to play that one. Now with the G family, it is that it's a family. Comes in a 9.5 and a 10.5. Both of them have the adjustable sleeves. To me, that's the biggest thing on tour with it as well, is that with the previous one, we had so many people who were needing to actually add a little bit of loft. And by only having that 9-degree head, to add loft, you had to shut the face, which is kind of the opposite of what you're wanting to do for those tour players. So having that extra head gives you the ability to do a lot more in the fitting world. And beyond that, we also added the STG fairway wood. So our fairway woods have always leaned in I'd call it the mid spin range. We've never had that like ultra low spin bomber fairway wood. And that's where the G family is the perfect place to introduce that. So with the STG, it's a fully titanium fairway wood with an 80-gram stainless plate as well as an 8-gram front plate, and then the Cortec chamber that houses about 5 more grams as well, concentrated really, really low. So a compact head that speaks to that STG also, with a really low spin and a phenomenal sound to it.
Yeah, I do love it. Still now, all the carbon, I still prefer that titanium sounding fairway wood. There's something about it. I don't know so much in the driver, but fairway wood for sure. And it's just, this is an old school looking thing in a good way. That gloss finish, that really simple shape. Right?
Yep,
absolutely. Actually, the old Sonatec kind of style of
which was a fantastic wood. And you're right, the head shape itself, it's so funny. The second you mention it's the titanium fairway wood, when people think titanium, your head instantly goes to, oh, great, that means it'll be bigger. This is actually a titanium that's smaller than our stainless one. It's smaller because we wanted to concentrate so much mass low. Titanium allows us to do that. So, it's kind of flipping the use of titanium versus the traditional thinking of how you would use it.
Yeah.
You definitely have got that weight down forward and low in this thing. You can see that bolt right up front there, and that big plate is tungsten. Did you say?
It's stainless, but it's thick stainless. That's one of those things. It's funny how when you use stainless versus when you use tungsten, you could make it as tungsten. It would just be thinner and the mass would be concentrated in the same place. It's an interesting one. So yeah, we're using stainless there because that gave us a little bit more, a little bit better feel out of that. So using the stainless on that titanium, that combination just gave a better feel for us because we didn't have to go as thin as you would have had to if you went with tungsten.
Sure. Tungsten's a pain to cast anyway, so it makes it difficult.
Absolutely, it is. You're right about that.
Stainless is nice and easy.
And maybe flip-flopping back here, I think that's the end of the STG family, right? There's no hybrid in this family.
Correct.
Going back to, and then maybe this is a little odd, is for the iron structure, the wedge structure. Mizuno irons have always been considered the greatest, and the wedges have been around for a long time, but they kind of have sat in the background. The T-22 definitely stood out as something different, and this T-24, if I'm correct right now, there's some definite cool, you've done a lot more with grind. You've got V and X. I'll let you run through this. And also that finish, touch on the finish.
That's one of my favorite things.
I don't really guess it too, but people don't understand that 90% of the wedges sold in the United States are actually cast. I mean, all the Cleveland stuff, all the Vokies are cast. People don't realize that not many companies are really forging them.
To me, that's the most, I'd say, head-scratching thing in the world is how many players would only play a forged iron and then just immediately gravitate towards a cast wedge.
Doesn't make any sense, right?
It's amazing. It's mind-boggling. Like, get them in a room with me, and I'm gonna beat them up about that a little bit. So, to me, the biggest thing is, when we're talking about forging, the reason we forge golf clubs, I talked about at the very front end about the grain flow forging process. Consistency of feel, consistency of impact, distance control, all of those things. Yes, they're absolutely critical in iron. They're even more critical in a wedge. So to me, that's why the grain flow forging of a wedge is a huge thing to do. So with that, the T-24 features that same grain flow forging process I talked about. We do it, I'll say, if there is something you could say of, oh, well, here's why a cast might be better. Cast is a little bit harder a material because it doesn't need to flow with those molds. But what we've done is we've actually forged them out of a boron material. It's a tin 25 boron. And what that boron does, it actually adds a little bit of strength to that material as well, which means it won't wear as quickly. And wear, it becomes critical when you're CNC milling a groove, when you're getting a very sharp corner. If you get that sharp corner soft, it'll start to die down quickly. But by using that material, we're actually dialing that groove in a step further and keeping it, the longevity of it, a step longer than we would before. So we're giving you a ton of spin. We're giving you that feel. And you mentioned the finishes. To me, what I love about the T-24 line more than anything is it's 3 different finishes, but it's 3 different finishes that tell a story from start to finish of that wedge. The 3 finishes are, we do it in raw, we do it in a denim copper, and we do it in what we call our soft white satin. Literally, if you lined those 3 up, that's that wedge from start to finish. It starts as that raw tin 25 material. Then you actually do a layer of nickel, a layer of copper on top of that, then another layer of nickel and the soft white satin on top of that. So it tells the story of what lives underneath it. On top of that, the denim copper just looks cool as well. So really cool, 3 different finishes, and it just tells you everything we're doing on that product.
Are the raw ones a millimeter smaller all round then?
They are fractionally smaller, and it's funny you say that. We do a little weight sorting because typically once you get to the end of a plating process, it tends to add about 3 grams to it. So what you can do is actually, when you're forging golf clubs, obviously there's a tolerance on all of that. Heavier ones can go towards raw, lighter ones can go towards ones. So you can actually utilize manufacturing tolerances to actually keep you tighter on tolerances. Finishes. It's a really nice way to engineer good out of bad, because tolerance is bad unless you're using it to your advantage.
Right.
Sure. Can you touch on the grinds a little bit? I know that it looks like you've expanded that line a little this year.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have 5 grinds that live within this family. The T-22 had 4 sets of grinds. We've added a 5th grind this generation. When you're talking about the least aggressive, you're talking about what we call our S grind. It's more of the full sole. It lives on our higher bounce options. It lives on our more of the gap wedge and pitching wedge lofts. From there, what that one is, it's really just very subtle trailing edge grind. Ever so slightly, we put some relief on the toe and the heel. Next would be the C grind. The D grind. The D grind leaves a lot more of that middle section and takes more from that toe and heel as well. So it starts to get more aggressive. Next, after that would be the C grind. C grind takes even more. So it literally is like an aggressive D where you're taking some off that trailing edge even more. Following that is the X grind. The X grind, is I'd call, is the most aggressive. And I say most aggressive because we took a ton off the trailing edge, the heel, and the toe. And the new grind that we've added this year is actually what we're calling our V grind. The V grind, it kind of lives in a different world because the shape of the grind is different, but we've seen a big trend on tour of players wanting significantly more bounce on that leading edge, but a really aggressive grind across that back. So, that trend of playing more bounce, I think it's good for a lot of players. So it gives you the bounce, it gives you that playability where you need it, but then when you need to open it, that V grind, it then has taken off that entire back edge, so it still sits low to the ground.
How much bounce is it, though? So you get 58, I've seen at 10, which is a fair amount considering it's pretty narrow.
Right. So it's 10 degrees at the way Mizuno measures, and it's funny how everyone measures bounce a little.
Yeah, right.
So our physical measurement of it is taking the leading edge and then the projection of the deepest part of the actually like the back flange where it's at its widest. And from there, the geometric center, that's where that 10-degree measurement is taken. So with that, it's 10 degrees right at that very peak, but that trailing edge, we've cut so much off that when you open it up, it plays closer to like a 5 or something like that.
I was going to say, you open the face and you put the heel down, there's nothing in that corner there.
There's nothing there, exactly. And that's where, the world of what does the number on the sole mean is almost like, what does the number on a driver mean? Like the loft isn't really what it is. It's almost a playability number than it is an actual measurement at this point.
It's awesome. It's a great lineup. I mean, I love all the wedge. I love the wedge finishes. I mean, I play raw. And maybe you can touch on that. This is an aside of Mizuno product. What advantages or disadvantages or nullness is there to having that raw wedge? You see all the guys on tour have it. You see people talk about spin and consistency. Yeah. Is there anything behind it?
I'd say for every positive, there's a negative in that, the thing with raw that gives it the potential to spin more is that when you plate something, that plating will adhere somewhat to a corner. So it tries to round that corner, or you're going to start to get rusting. So in general, it can leave that shoulder ever so slightly sharper. But that being said, a plating is a lot stronger than a mild carbon steel, even a boron carbon steel. So it's going to wear down quicker. So if you're replacing your wedges all the time and you want to play raw, you may get more out of it. But if you don't, you're quickly going to lose more than you got right off the bat. And on top of that, we do a thing that's called the HydroFlow micro groove, which is a laser milling that's between the grooves. And that's really to help channel moisture away and to give you more consistency in wet conditions. We do it below the plating. The reason we do it below the plating is we've shown in all of our testing that if it's done on top of the plating or if it's done, at surface level, any sort of like laser milling goes away really quickly. So your benefit, again, it wears off quickly. So on a raw wedge, that laser milling is still there, but again, that's going to go away quicker. So I'd say the life of the raw wedge is very, very short compared to the life of a plated wedge.
Right. That's a good answer.
I'm going raw. I don't play enough.
Yeah, exactly.
Plus, I don't pay for them, so that's awful.
There you go. That helps.
Well, Chris, that was awesome. We look forward. Hopefully, we can run the drivers this year. And we'll definitely run the irons. Everyone loves that kind of stuff. So keep an eye out for those on our robot reviews. We really appreciate your time today, Mike. To come on.
Thanks much. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me, guys. Love to do this. Let's do it again, and can't wait for everyone to see the results on the robot. And we'll get you those in hand very shortly. So looking forward to it.
Awesome. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.